Hello, this is PamelaTopjian, and today I'm going to talk about changes in our life. We're always going through changes, and it's interesting how some people seem to stay in the same spot, they work at the same place, they live as adults where they grew up, and just some people stay in their life situations for their whole life. And some people don't feel like they're stuck or being stagnant by doing this. And other people feel really held down by this. And they also will feel like they don't have any control or they don't have any choice. So I'm just going to go through some of my personal experiences with life changes. Some of you already know my whole story. Some of you maybe have read my book or have, know me personally, maybe. So I'm just going to go through some of my own life changes and then talk through it. There is another video that I did called From Breakdown to Breakthrough, and it's kind of going through more of like the trauma throughout my life and then the healing. And I'll put that link in the description below in case you're interested in that. But this one, I'm just going to talk about changes in general, and I'm not going to deep dive into any of those changes. So, my whole life, I've moved around a lot. I am 59 next week, and we're looking at a move at the at the end of this year. We're looking to move, and that is to be our final I was going to say final resting place, but that's to be our home that we are in until we die or go to a nursing home or whatever. That's the final place. That's the plan anyway. So, at 9 years old, my parents divorced and we moved out. And it seemed like almost every year or every 2 years or so, my family had to move again because of, we grew up in poverty, as I've mentioned before, mainly because my parents divorced and my father did not help at all in any way. So we moved around a lot. So I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago in Illinois, and I had lived in I'm gonna name some of in case you know Illinois. The first house that I lived in was in Brookfield, but we moved when I was 6 months old, so I don't remember that. But LaGrange, Illinois, then went to Palos Hills, Illinois, Hickory Hills, Illinois, Naperville, Illinois, and Westmont, Illinois, and I even lived in Summit, which if you know Illinois, Summit's probably the worst place I lived. It used to have a nickname called Scummit. So it gives you an idea of what it was like there. So those are some of the places that I lived. We moved all the time. And so from a very young age, I never felt at home. I never felt that I had a place that was home. And so as an adult, then after my first marriage, moved to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And when I lived in Michigan, we moved around a bit as well. So we lived in Crystal Falls, Michigan. It's where my daughter was born. And we lived in Negaunee, Michigan, and I think we lived in Marquette for a little bit. So we moved around a bit. And even in Crystal Falls, we lived in, I think, a couple different houses, 3 different houses in Crystal Falls. So that's crazy, right? But I also lived in Lower Michigan just for a few years. And then I moved to Arizona and just lived there for 3 years. And in Arizona, I was in one apartment and then moved to another apartment and then into a home. And all of these places were in different towns or cities or whatever in Arizona. So then I lived in Missouri, and that was just 4 years. Seems like much longer than that though, but that was just 4 years in Missouri. And I lived in one small house that we moved from Arizona in Missouri, and then we moved to another house near my work, and then I lived in a small little house that I rented on my own after I divorced the second time. So, yeah. And then from Missouri, I came to California. And the situation that brought me to California is a whole story in its own. And you can read my book or you can watch that other video that's going to be in the description below. But I had lived in so many places in California in such a short amount of time, and I'm not going to go through them all, but it's all just like right around Sacramento area. So that's where I am today. And the place that I'm living in now, I've been here, I think, about 3 years. And like I said, we're moving at the end of this year. But that's our final move, hopefully. That's the plan. So all of those changes. And one of the good things about it is you don't accumulate a whole lot of stuff. So a lot of people my age have rooms or storage sheds or just a whole basement full or a whole garage full of just stuff from their whole life because they haven't moved so much. So that's one benefit to moving a lot, is that you don't accumulate a whole bunch of stuff that your kids will have to take care of or figure out what to do with, once you pass away. And with all these changes is my biggest fear in life right now at this stage in life is developing Alzheimer's. And I don't want to lose my mind. I don't want to not be able to care for myself. And I don't want to not know who my children are. I don't want to live my life if I have no quality of life. So my biggest fear is Alzheimer's. And one of the ways to prevent Alzheimer's, they say, is to learn, they say drive a different way to a place that you drive all the time, drive a different way than you normally do, because that there's neurotransmitters in your brain that are going to fire off differently when you're doing something different. You have to pay attention to it. So doing things differently, even brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand. If you normally do something on autopilot, do it differently so you're not on autopilot. And that's good for your brain. It's good for brain health. So setting up a new home again, um, if you're moving in a different state or city, you need to find a different grocery store that you go to, right? Learn a new streets and new neighborhood and everything. So that's good for brain health. So there's that. Plus, I'm kind of surprised. Like I said, I'm in California now, and I've lived in, places that are, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. It's snowing there from late October until May, and sometimes the last storm is in June, and actually almost always the last snowstorm is in June. It will warm up and a lot of the snow will melt, but then there's one last big storm. So I've been downhill skiing, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing. I don't like the snow. I don't like the cold, but I did those things not regularly, not often, but I have that experience. And where I live now, there are people who've never even seen snow, let alone lived in it, and you have to shovel and the whole experience, driving through a blizzard, just the whole experience. I'm glad that I've had that experience. I'm glad that I know what different states are like, and the Midwest compared to the West Coast is very different. And I'm glad that I've had those experiences. So I think that's important. That's a benefit, all these changes. Starting over, as a kid, you always have to move schools. Went back to school, went to college in my 30s. I've changed careers a few times. So I've worked in several different jobs and different types of jobs and completely changed careers a couple times. I'm glad I've had those experiences. It's fun and interesting to know about different careers and different ways that people work in the world and having that experience. So there's that. And so many people fear change. So I think it's important to embrace change. And I think that's going to be something in the title about embracing change and knowing that your path is always evolving. Your life's path and even your life's purpose maybe is always kind of changing and growing with you and evolving as you go through life. So whatever you've done, like if this job or this career or this place didn't work out, or this relationship or anything in your life didn't work out, rather than looking at it as a failure or why can't I ever find the right place to live or find the right career or job or why do I have to always go through all these changes? Rather than thinking of it that way or thinking of it as a negative, try to embrace those changes and realize that we're learning through our all these changes. We're learning through everything that we do, and anything big in your life, there's a bigger lesson. So you might not even know it right away, but later in life you probably will if you reflect on it. And I think it's important to reflect on the life changes and reflect on your life every once in a while. And writing my book was huge in healing because it made me sort of reflect on everything. And it's very healing to do that. Puts the whole puzzle together and connects those dots and brings more clarity to your whole life. And that will help you to understand the lessons that you've learned from all your changes. So I used to say everybody should write a book, but I think that it's important to write it down as you're reflecting. So I heard somebody say today on a podcast, and it's the Life Shift podcast. I'll go ahead and mention it because it really talks a lot about all these life changes that are pivotal moments in people's lives. And it's a great podcast with just story after story after story. And they're not all like trauma. We think of big traumatic stories that changes our lives, and there's plenty of those for sure. But there's others that are not about a trauma experience that, had changed their life, just something else, just a conversation, just a phone call, just a dream, something that really changed somebody's whole life in just a moment. So that's the Life Shift podcast. So shout out to Matt, the host, but that's a great one to help you embrace change and to help you reflect on your life changes. So yeah, don't frame it in your mind as a mistake or a regret. Look on it as, what did I learn from this? What kinds of lessons have I gained from this experience? So there's a song that says in it, does it ever drive you crazy just how fast the night changes, everything that you've ever dreamed of disappearing when you wake up? And that is really profound to me because I've had plenty of those life changes that, like, in just an instant, basically like overnight, your whole life changes. It can be something that was a negative experience, something that was harmful, and everything changes because of that. But it can also be like a miracle, like something changes overnight, and wow, I wake up to this message on my phone that's accepting me into whatever, something, right? So, I mean, there's so many different possibilities. So one of the things with all these changes, it can make you feel like you're not in control of your life. And you might feel like, I don't know where I'm going. I'm just in a rowboat, or in a canoe or whatever, going along with the river and going where it takes me without the oars, or you can try to reflect on, what was this last year like? What do I want to change for next year? And how do I get there? What do I need to do? And are my values and are my dreams and goals reflected in my actions every day? So that's how you can kind of gain a little more control over it. And also at the same time, it's a balance of letting go of that control because things can happen. Good things and not so great things that seem like you had no idea was coming, and it changes your whole life. And know that it's not always bad. It's not always a bad thing. I've had, more changes in my life. I've had 3 marriages. I'm in my 3rd marriage. Those are all big life changes and really some life lessons. And actually, I was considering doing one just on relationships, just, basically what I've learned along the way. So let me know below if you're interested in that, or if you have another topic of discussion you'd like me to discuss on here. But talking about reflecting and asking yourself, what are my goals? What do I want different this year? For me, like the new year, really, so my birthday is in June, and A lot of big changes have happened for me in this month. My daughter was born in June. I married my third husband in June. Um, I had passed my nursing boards in State Board of Nursing in June. I get real nostalgic in June, and I always think about, I reflect on the past year, and I think it's like the changing of my age that makes me feel like it's a new beginning, like a new year, because I'm a new age. So at this point in my life, I asked myself, what's next? What am I going to do next? What's this next part of my life going to be? I'm, like I said, I'm turning 59, so I'm going to be coming into my 60s. I've had, so many different life experiences. I've had a few different careers. And what's next? What do I really feel is right and true for me in my heart and soul? And what do I need to do to get to there? And how much am I going to, I don't want to say fight for it, but, I do strongly believe, we do hear a lot, never give up, but I do think there's a point when you have to realize whether something is right for you or not, or if it wasn't what you expected, or there's some challenges that you didn't foresee that life is going to be a challenge, and challenge is good for you, but there comes a point sometimes when you have to realize that, if you're knocking on that door, if it's not opening, don't keep standing there knocking. It might not be the right door for you. Sort of put a little bit of faith in the universe on that your path is coming in front of you. So that's what I was going to say about that podcast that I forgot that they said in the Life Shift podcast today. I watched it. They talked about how on your path, if you're driving at night, you only can see as far as your headlights will show you, right? So that's all you need to know. Like this, I'm going to be going this far. And then as you drive along and you get to there, I'm going to go this far as my headlights can see. I don't have to see the next town that I'm going to know that I can make it to that place. So it's the same thing as like taking that first step, right? The journey of 1,000 miles starts with a one step or something like that. I think it's a Rumi quote. But it's the same kind of thing. You don't have to see it all to start on that drive with your headlights on at night. You only have to see in front of you as far as your headlights will show you. And then, things become clear the further you go. So that is a really good metaphor, I guess, or analogy for moving along your life path and following those hunches, those intuitive nudges, following your heart and soul and what feels right for you. So don't be afraid of change. And even if there's some traumatic experiences that cause the change, there's still going to be life lessons. And I say that the more emotion that's in it, the harder it feels, the heavier it feels, then that's a bigger lesson that you need to learn. So always reflect on those moments after you're safe, after you have felt it, because as they say, you have to feel it to heal it. So don't run from those. Don't try to forget those moments. Try to see what lessons there were for you in those moments. Of a lot of the changes I've had in my life, I look at these differently, than I used to. So I used to say, oh, I regret this and I regret that. I could have done this differently. And yeah, there's a lot of situations that I could have handled differently, and I would have handled differently had I had the wisdom that I do now and the knowledge that I do now. I think that's all I have to say about that. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And if you got anything out of this, whether it was helpful or you just found it interesting, please hit the like. And if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe. It really helps the channel. It really means a lot to me. And I appreciate you all that are here sharing in this time and space with me. Thanks.